We are in Leduc at the Leduc Fire Hall today. Welcome to a brand new episode of Go. I'm your host, Giesbrecth. What is the most important thing that every family should have in place in case of an emergency? We're going to be talking about that on today's show in honor of Emergency Preparedness Week. But first, we remember the hundreds of workers who have died from work-related accidents. Here's Sean TV's Tim Dancy with your first story. Up next, Sean TV's Brad Walker takes us on a road trip to one of the oldest French settlements in Alberta. Coming up after the break, what do you need in your emergency toolkit? We're going to show you after this. Welcome back. Once again, we are in Leduc at the Leduc Fire Hall for Emergency Preparedness Week. And in front of me here, I have that toolkit we were speaking about. Everything from batteries to a dust mask, a blanket, some duct tape. We have a can opener, first aid kit, etc. So lots of things that your family should have already prepared and put away in a bin like this. So if an emergency happens, you have this ready to go. And coming up in the show, we're going to be speaking with Fire Chief George Clancy about the most important thing that every family should have in place, even more so than this. Stay tuned for that. But first, Sean TV's Brand McLaughlin introduces us to a local photographer hoping to shed more light on suicide prevention. What does it mean to be a champion? Up next, we learned from one local athlete who's recently made that discovery for herself. Thanks for that, Dave. We are now here with Fire Chief George Clancy with the Leduc Fire Hall talking about being prepared for an emergency. Now, as we already showed everyone what's needed in your emergency toolkit, even more important than the toolkit is having a plan in place. So what kind of plans are we talking about?
I think the biggest thing that you have to look at is there's three tasks that we look at is know your risks to your community, have a plan in place, and then get a kit that we just looked at in regards to being prepared for any emergency that we will face. That could be anything from a storm, a fire, a flood, tornado, anything at all like that. The problem with a plan is that when we actually build a plan, which will, if you go to the getprepared.ca site, you will be able to get a plan on there. Take about 20 minutes to fill it out. We need to practice it.
So how do you start practicing that plan with your family?
Basically, sit down with your family, discuss what the if we have an emergency, here's what we're going to do. Whether that's contacts between the group or contacts outside of the group. So if they have relatives that they need to contact in the case of an emergency, if somebody goes missing, they're the plans. They're the things that you want to have in place in the plan. But you also want to make sure that you practice it.
What's the most common mistake you see people make when an emergency happens? What's the first thing that goes wrong? I
think it's more of the panic that sets in. And if we don't have a plan in place, that's where the panic takes over. So it's basically when we have emergencies, you know, they're like the fire service, we face emergencies every day. Well, the only way that we can face the emergencies is by training for them. And once we train for them, it's an automatic reaction to it. So we recommend to our families, our residents, that they plan for that too. If they do have an emergency, they have a plan in place to do it, and basically they can practice that.
And I think the most important thing is to be proactive rather than reactive.
It's really important to be very proactive, specifically in any sort of emergency preparedness that you have to do. You can see the type of storms that we get today, a lot different than we did 20 years ago, right? So the weather patterns are changing. We do have the risks of tornadoes. We do have the risks of all sorts of storms. So be prepared.
There we go. Getprepared.ca. Thank you so much. Stay tuned. More after this. Welcome back. Once again, we are in Leduc at the Leduc Fire Hall, and we've climbed on top of a fire truck. Again, we are here on location for Emergency Preparedness Week. To learn more about creating an emergency plan for your family, head to getprepared.ca. Up next, in honor of Mental Health Week, Sean TV's Bianca Jade learns how a local psychiatrist is donating his time. Take a look. Up next, in our Mayor's Awards for the enhancement of an inclusive community, we wander through Ambrose Place. Do you or does someone you know suffer from eczema or psoriasis? In today's episode of Skin Deep, we take a look at treating these common skin conditions. Before we go, here is your on-the-go calendar. And that's the show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, you can check out getprepared.ca to create your own emergency preparedness plan for your family. I've been your host, Giesbrecth. We'll see you next time.